Imagine a man sitting alone in a quiet room. The TV is playing, the lights are dim, a half-finished dinner sits untouched. He scrolls through his phone not to find new messages, but to find old ones. The ones he ignored when you sent them. The ones where your heart was uncluttered, warm, uncalculated. He never imagined that someday silence would answer him back. Because here is a secret every emotionally intelligent woman eventually learns. Men rarely understand what they had when they still have it. They only understand when they no longer do. Human psychology is inconvenient that way. The brain is wired to normalize comfort, to habituate to joy, to tune out stability. We notice storms, never the clear skies. We remember pain, rarely the gentle touch. And you were peace. You were the soft place his restless masculinity landed. You were emotional sanctuary disguised as routine. He didn't understand that a woman who loves without fear is not weak. She is a mirror to his highest potential, and a man will run from what exposes his emotional immaturity. Men do not forget a woman who loved them without losing herself, because she becomes the standard, but not the possession. She becomes the whisper they replay years later, when every imitation fails to recreate the original softness. He will think about moments he dismissed as ordinary. The time you laughed at his worst joke, the way your hand rested lightly on his forearm when he talked about his father, the times you didn't ask for attention, you simply existed beside him, confidently rooted in your feminine self. Soft presence is the loudest memory. Gentle consistency is the deepest scar. History has shown this again and again. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, conquered the most difficult landscapes: war, plague, political betrayal. But when his wife Faustina died, his journal entries revealed what only time can teach a man, that the woman who grounded him emotionally was the one his soul clung to long after the empire celebrated his victories. He didn't immortalize her through conquest. He immortalized her through absence. Her death forced him to realize the truth most men resist. It is not the world that steadies a man. It is a woman who sees him without trying to fix him. That is the kind of love a man never forgets. But the irony of the human nervous system is merciless. The more reliable the source of comfort, the less the reward pathways activate. Familiarity lowers dopamine. Certainty erases anticipation. So a woman who gives without games never triggers his panic, never forces his survival brain to chase, never inflames his ego with competition. And so he mistakes you for oxygen, needed, taken for granted, invisible until scarcity suffocates him. You must understand this biologically, not emotionally. A man who has been overstimulated by chaos learns to crave adrenaline. He thinks he wants passion, but what he really wants is unpredictability. This is why so many men sabotage the kind of woman who would have healed them, because he equates calm with boredom and drama with significance. You didn't compete. You didn't chase. You didn't scream. You didn't weaponize attention. You simply loved. And the simplicity of your love was something his undeveloped emotional nervous system could not recognize as value. He assumed love was a performance. He assumed effort defined desire. He assumed your peace was a strategy, not a state of being. But a woman who has learned to love without losing herself isn't performing. She is simply living. She is the embodiment of feminine energy that radiates rather than demands. Feminine energy doesn't hunt. It attracts. It doesn't bargain. It embodies. It doesn't chase. It invites. And every masculine heart, whether conscious or not, remembers the woman who does not audition for love. Think of Napoleon. He battled empires, marched armies through frozen hell. But in the quiet hours of war, he wrote letter after letter to Josephine. He spoke of longing, of yearning, of aching to return to her presence. Not to her beauty or her obedience, but to the feeling of being emotionally held. Even when she was not physically there, he could command a continent, but not his own attachment. Because masculine minds break under deprivation, not under rejection. They collapse when softness vanishes, not when anger arrives. Anger gives them something to fight. Silence gives them something to fear. This is why the woman who leaves without theatrics becomes unforgettable. The woman who begs becomes noise. The woman who disappears becomes myth. You became myth the moment you stopped explaining yourself. You didn't slam the door. You didn't write paragraphs. You didn't issue ultimatums. You simply pulled your heart inward and let him experience the vacuum. It is the most brutal psychological trigger. When you stop trying to be understood, they finally begin to understand. The male ego is constructed around identity. Men attach their worth to how others react to them. You withdrew reaction. And with it, the mirror he used to validate himself. You think he left you? No. You carried him emotionally until the weight became unbearable. He merely slid off your shoulders. This is the silent labor of feminine love. Women do not love halfway. They love with nervous systems, not ideas. They love with presence, not performance. You remembered his childhood stories. You noticed patterns in his silence. You understood why he pulled back when overwhelmed. You learned to hold space without smothering. That is emotional labor. He thought it was instinct. He thought it was your nature. He thought it was guaranteed. He mistook your willingness for infinite supply. The wives of explorers learned this too. They kept households alive while their husbands hunted legacy across oceans. Magellan died on an island halfway around the world. But the woman who raised his children, dealt with debt, and reassembled his life was the one who ensured his name survived. Men chase empires. Women preserve them. And yet history carved statues of the men. It carved loneliness into the women. But the feminine is changing. Today's women are awakening. You are awakening. You no longer mother broken men. You no longer become emotional bandages for masculine wounds. You no longer sacrifice identity for proximity. You are learning the truth. A man is not unforgettable because you love him. You are unforgettable because you love yourself while loving him. You didn't lose yourself. You simply gave love to someone incapable of holding it, and he will remember that forever. Because now he sits with his unsent texts. He scrolls through memories like they're artifacts of an extinct religion. He suddenly understands why your softness mattered. He understands why your peace was rare. He understands why every woman who came after felt shallow, loud, exhausting. He will try to mimic what he once rejected. He will buy flowers for someone else the way he never did for you. He will say, "I'm sorry, faster next time." He will practice loyalty a bit harder. But here is the psychological knife. He will try to be a better man, but never for the woman who taught him how. Because that's how male realization works. It is delayed. It is retroactive. It is cruel. You are the lesson. Someone else will be the application. And still, he won't forget the source. Feminine power is not about the pain you survived. It is about the identity you reclaimed. The moment you shifted from, "Why wasn't I enough?" to, "Why did I allow someone to treat me like less?" That was the rebirth. You stopped performing love. You started embodying worth. And in that moment, you became the woman every man remembers, not because she was perfect, but because she was whole. And the masculine heart cannot unsee wholeness once it loses it. It cannot unhear softness once silence replaces it. It cannot unlove the woman who cared without chains. He may move on physically. He may laugh loudly. He may post pictures, date new faces, pretend renewal. But you will live in a different part of him. Not the pride, not the ego, the memory. The memory of when love did not demand sacrifice. The memory of when peace had a name. The memory of when he was loved without being impressive. You were not a chapter in his story. You were the moment he realized he was the villain in someone else's. And because of that, he will never forget you. There comes a moment in every woman's life where silence feels like oxygen. You don't arrive there through revenge. You arrive there through exhaustion. The kind that doesn't scream or beg, but whispers, "I no longer want to fight for someone who is fighting against me." Detachment is not the death of love. Detachment is the rebirth of self. At first, you think healing will require a dramatic final tears, monologues, confrontation, exposure. But emotional maturity doesn't seek victory. It seeks peace. And peace does not announce itself. It simply stops reacting. When you finally step back from him, there was no grand speech, no final warning, no ultimatum carefully crafted to manipulate his guilt. You simply stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who was committed to misunderstanding it. That was the moment your power came home to you. You noticed how your mind changed first. You stopped replaying his excuses. Your brain stopped performing forensic analysis on every unanswered text. No more decoding crumbs like they were gifts. You recognized the psychological trap. You were stuck in intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive form of attention. A reward, then a punishment. A burst of affection, then a drought. Just enough warmth to keep you waiting, never enough consistency to feel secure. The human nervous system is wired for patterns from childhood, and so many women mistake familiarity for love. If a girl learned that affection was conditional growing up, only earned when she was quiet, helpful, undemanding, then as an adult she will gravitate to men who force her to prove herself. Men who make her feel like love must be constantly earned. That was you. Not because you were weak, but because your nervous system was trained to survive scarcity. But detachment, true detachment, begins when you say, "I am no longer auditioning for roles in someone else's life." You didn't push him away. You simply stopped leaning forward. Your messages became shorter, not colder, simply more dignified. You no longer double texted. You no longer explained your tone. You no longer asked, "Are you mad at me?" You simply matched his investment, and he felt it. He didn't know how to name it, but the masculine ego always senses the shift. Like animals in winter sensing the temperature drop, he recognized something was changing. You no longer rushed to respond. You no longer rearranged your schedule when he appeared. Your world no longer revolved around his availability. He had been the sun, you the planet, rotating faithfully around his orbit. Then you became a star of your own. Men don't notice effort, they notice energy. You didn't need to block him. You didn't need to post quotes about toxicity. You didn't need to make threats. You simply reclaimed your center of gravity. It was the most radical thing you had ever done, because for once, you weren't trying to hurt anyone. You were trying to stop hurting yourself. Detachment is often misunderstood. People think it is cold, emotionless, heartless. But detachment is actually the deepest form of compassion, because it honors the most important person in the dynamic you. When you stopped trying to be chosen, your entire life responded. Your sleep improved. Your appetite returned. Your hobbies breathed again. You remembered what your laughter sounded like without apology. You began to notice how much space he occupied in your mind with so little effort. His name had been a ghost haunting every notification, a shadow intercepting every moment of peace. And then You simply stopped feeding it. Historically, women have mastered detachment in the most brutal ways. They did not always have the luxury of leaving, but they always had the ability to withdraw emotionally. Empress Xu of the Ming Dynasty understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Her husband, the emperor, fell under the spell of a concubine who wielded jealousy like a weapon. The court expected Xu to compete. Instead, she withdrew, not from the palace, but from the drama. She focused on education, charity, governance. She did not chase. She did not cry. She did not engage in humiliation warfare. And history remembers her, not the concubine, because women who choose sovereignty over competition become immortal. Detachment is not loud. It is elegant. It is silent. It is the kind of warfare that leaves no blood, but ends every battle. Men who rely on power games do not know how to fight it. Your man thought you would always tolerate crumbs. He thought the cycle would outlast your self-respect. He thought, she won't leave. She cares too much. He mistook attachment for dependence. He mistook softness for surrender. He mistook loyalty for fear. Then one day, he looked around and realized you were no longer the background music to his life. You didn't disappear. You simply stopped showing up where you weren't invited. And a strange thing happened. He started to hear his own thoughts. The silence you gifted him became a mirror. That's when the panic began. Not immediately. Masculine ego has a delay. It needs time to process loss, time to convince itself it still has control, time to realize it doesn't. The first stage is denial. She just needs space. She's busy. She'll text later. She always comes back. When that fails, he shifts to bargaining random check-ins, casual messages. Hey, at midnight, a meme on Instagram. What are you up to? After weeks of neglect, he is testing the waters. Not because he wants you, but because he wants to confirm he was never the one who needed you. You do not respond like you used to. No dopamine rush. No heart skipping. No performance. He sends nostalgia. You send indifference. He offers breadcrumbs. You offer silence. Not because you are cruel, but because you finally understand your value. Your heart is not an open buffet. It is a banquet with limited seats. You did the unthinkable for the feminine heart. You let go without punishment. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't expose him to friends. You didn't post subliminals. You didn't sabotage him socially. You walked away with grace. Revenge paralyzes. Grace terrifies. There is a Roman story rarely told. When Agrippina the Younger realized Nero, her own son, would destroy everything she stood for, she stopped pleading for respect. She didn't cry or beg. She withdrew. Her silence frightened him more than accusation. The lack of emotional leverage stripped him of control. Men who are used to chaos cannot function in calm. They don't know how to fight stillness. You became still. You removed drama from the equation. You denied him the performance he assumed you would give. And now the laws of psychology took over. Humans desire most what they are no longer allowed to access. Scarcity is the mother of longing. Absence is the father of regret. You stopped being available. He started seeing you. You stopped filling the silence. He started hearing it. You stopped chasing meaning. He started questioning his own. Because when a woman detaches authentically, she does not close a door. She disappears from the building. You didn't do it to punish him. You did it to return to yourself. You re-entered your own life like a woman walking back into her hometown. Everything felt familiar yet newly sacred. You remembered your dreams. You respected your boundaries. You honored your emotions. You learned to say no without guilt. You learned to say yes without fear. Slowly, the imprint he left on your nervous system began to fade. What was once an obsession became a memory. What was once a wound became a lesson. What was once a love story became a chapter. Not because he was unimportant, but because you became more important than him. And this, ironically, is why he cannot forget you. Men do not miss what you gave them. They miss who they were able to be when they were with you. The woman who loves without losing herself teaches a man to feel seen. The woman who detaches teaches him to see himself. He will try to come back, not always in words, often in nostalgia, in longing, in curiosity. His ego will try to reclaim what his arrogance lost. But you are no longer the girl who begged. You are the woman who breathes. And detachment has a final, devastating truth. You don't have to hate someone to stop letting them ruin you. You can walk away with an open heart, a clear mind, and a future that welcomes joy instead of begging for scraps. You became the woman who left, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally cared about yourself more. And that is the kind of departure a man remembers forever. The world becomes strangely quiet the moment a woman stops negotiating for her worth. It is not a dramatic slam of the door, not a declaration to the universe, not a speech rehearsed in the mirror. It is a single inward decision. I no longer beg for love. When that decision finds its home in you, the people around you feel it like an earthquake they cannot name. He feels it. The man who thought he could keep you on a string suddenly senses instability. Not because you're angry, not because you're chasing another, not because you blocked him, but because your energy, the invisible current he fed on, has shifted from I hope to I deserve. Men are incredibly sensitive to emotional supply. They may not articulate it, but they feel it in their nervous system, the way a sailor feels wind direction changing. That's why when you stop over-explaining yourself, when you stop sending those just checking in messages, when you stop being the emotional sponge for his confusion, he doesn't congratulate you. He becomes uncertain. A man doesn't panic when you cry. He panics when you go silent. Because tears are still attachment, still devotion, still investment. Silence is detachment, and detachment is power. It is not revenge, it is self-respect. When Catherine the Great took the throne of Russia, she wasn't supposed to. They told her she was merely a wife, a foreigner, an ornament in the royal lineage. They expected her to play the role of a beautiful presence, quiet, agreeable, indirect. She didn't. She learned languages, studied political philosophy, built strategic alliances. She understood something most women never learn: the difference between being admired and being obeyed. Admiration is sweet, but it has no backbone. Obedience is born from certainty, direction, and the refusal to shrink. She never begged the court to love her. She was decisive. She acted like the throne already belonged to her, and history bent. You don't need a crown or a palace to understand that principle. Your emotional life is a throne. Every time you played for clarity, every time you wait 5 hours to respond because he waits 4, every time you adjust yourself to avoid seeming too much, you surrender territory. You speak a silent mantra: please choose me. Please validate me. Please see me as enough. Feminine power is not screaming for attention, nor is it performing self-sacrifice. It is certainty. It is alignment. It is the refusal to contort your identity to match someone's temporary interest. When you choose your throne, the throne of your emotional boundaries, people treat you differently. Not because you told them to, but because you embody your own worth like Catherine embodied authority. The man who disappears and returns like the tide doesn't respond to lectures. He responds to scarcity. Not scarcity that is faked. Not scarcity you perform like a tactic, but the natural scarcity of a woman who is already nourished from within. Psychology calls this intrinsic self-valuation, when your worth comes from internal standards, not external reactions. A woman who operates from intrinsic value does not explain why she won't accept breadcrumbs. She simply doesn't accept breadcrumbs. She doesn't punish him. She doesn't shame him. She doesn't retaliate. She steps out of the game entirely. Think of this difference. A woman says, "I want a man who puts in effort." But her actions accept minimal effort. She claims she wants clarity, but she answers every half-hearted text. She says she wants emotional intimacy, but she tolerates emotional starvation for fear of losing him. That's not desire, that's self-betrayal disguised as hope. And any man, even one with a good heart, learns from your behavior more than your words. You teach him how valuable your time is by how you allow it to be used. You teach him how valuable your emotions are by the way you protect them. If you let him play you like an emotional ATM, deposit a crumb, withdraw devotion, he will never invest. The tragedy is that women interpret his inconsistency as their inadequacy. They try to solve it with productivity, more effort, more presence, more availability. But inconsistency is not a problem to fix. It's a message to translate. When someone is inconsistent, they are telling you where you stand in their hierarchy. That doesn't require a confrontation. It requires a decision. To understand this, look at Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. She wasn't born into the favorable seat of power. She inherited a kingdom under threat. Every negotiation with the Portuguese invaders was a game of psychological chess. In one famous diplomatic meeting, the Portuguese governor sat on a chair while offering her only a floor mat. It was a dominance play. Be beneath me. Without a word of complaint, she motioned to an attendant who knelt and became her human throne. She negotiated eye to eye. He expected her to accept humiliation. She responded with self-authority. That moment wasn't about war or politics. It was about emotional posture. You are constantly in negotiations with men, not legal ones, emotional ones. Requests disguised as silence, demands disguised as distance, praise disguised as crumbs. They test your posture. Will she kneel? Will she shrink? Will she chase? A powerful woman doesn't fight for equality in tone or text or attention. She simply meets the room eye to eye. If the only seat he offers you is the floor, you don't argue. You stop attending that room. There is something deeply magnetic about feminine sovereignty, not because it intimidates men. That is a misconception. But because it awakens something ancient in them respect. Men who are truly masculine do not want dolls to pose on pedestals or mothers to absorb their chaos. They want women they must rise to meet. Masculine energy is drawn not to obedience, but to mystery, the sacred mystery of a woman whose self-worth is untouchable. A man like that studies you, not because you play games, but because your essence cannot be purchased with crumbs. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't crave control. You radiate centeredness. That centeredness is silent thunder, invisible, yet unmistakable. You may think power means dominance, superiority, or harsh independence. But feminine power is not masculine mimicry. It is softness protected by boundaries. It is compassion anchored in self-respect. It is vulnerability paired with discernment. You can be warm and still be selective. You can be deeply loving and still be unwilling to be an option. You can be nurturing and still walk away when nurturing becomes exploitation. A flower is delicate, yet you cannot force its bloom. That is the paradox men will never fully understand, and yet they feel it in their bones. Pay attention to your body when you think about him. Does your chest tighten with anticipation or dread? Does your stomach twist because you are excited or because you're anxious? The body keeps score long before the mind makes excuses. Biological psychology has mapped how women rewire themselves around inconsistent relationships, cortisol spikes, dopamine starves. Nervous system becomes hyper, attuned to reward scarcity. That's why a man who texts every 3 days can feel more addictive than the one who texts every morning. It isn't love, it's intermittent reinforcement. The brain is rewarded unpredictably, and unpredictability feels like intensity. This is how casinos keep gamblers hooked. It is not affection, it is stimulus. Your nervous system is not craving him. It is craving relief from uncertainty. And you mistake relief for connection. But when you step into emotional sovereignty, the pattern breaks. The dopamine spike disappears, and for a moment you feel numb, empty, eerily calm. That calm is not loneliness, it is detox. Your nervous system is recalibrating. It is forming a new association. Safety is not found in waiting. Love is not found in scarcity. My worth is not dependent on someone else's delay. The moment this belief roots itself, the addiction dissolves. And that is when the dynamic shifts. Suddenly he is calling more. Suddenly he is observing you. Suddenly he is jealous of the attention you give others, even attention you give yourself. He is confused because he cannot manipulate a woman who doesn't feed on promises. He cannot threaten abandonment because you do not fear solitude. He cannot withhold affection because you generate your own. He stands there like a man staring at an ocean he thought he owned, only to realize tides answer to the moon, not to him. In that moment, your power is not noise. It is quiet. It is not revenge. It is clarity. And a man who once felt like the sun in your universe suddenly discovers he was only a candle. A flame that lit your vulnerability. Yes, but not the fire that defines you. You are the hearth. You are the heat. You are the force that makes things grow. And here is the final truth of this part. The one most women resist feminine power is not about getting him to choose you. It is about realizing you are a choice too. You are not the audition. You are the role. The man who sees that will rise. The man who cannot will fall away. And neither outcome will disturb your throne. Because when you finally become the woman who stops negotiating her worth, the world doesn't become quieter. It bows.